Sandra Cantu murder investigation. Sunday school teacher Melissa Huckabee charged with the brutal kidnapping, rape, and murder of 8-year-old Sandra Cantu is on tape admitting her involvement in another missing child case back in January. A little girl who lived in the very same trailer park as Huckabee and Sandra Cantu was reported missing for 4 hours on January 17th, only to be returned home by none other, allegedly, than Melissa Huckabee. Listen to the little girl's big sister describe the child's state when she came home.
Her speech was slurred because she could barely walk. She could barely stand. So they took her to the hospital, and the hospital told us that she had muscle relaxers in her system.
What? But were charges pressed against Huckabee? No. Why? Reports say police dismissed the incident because the child's mom smelled of alcohol and allegedly had some kind of drug on her. So did police botch the investigation, failing to catch somebody who went on allegedly to rape and kill another child? Melissa Huckabee explained the incident to a CBS reporter on the very day she was arrested in the Sandra Cantu case.
I had taken my daughter and one of her friends to the park, which I had done for the third time that week. The mother was, I guess, at work, and the grandmother had told the little girl that she could go to the park, which she does all the time. And when the mother came home, she didn't know where she was. I'd given the mother my phone number, my cell phone number, in case if anything will happen. She needed to get a hold of me. She claims to have lost the phone number.
Huckabee claims it was just a walk in the park. The little girl's family maintains Huckabee never had permission to take the child to the park. Does Huckabee's involvement in this alleged 4-hour abduction show a pattern of behavior and a motive that the prosecution could use against her? So many issues tonight. Give me a holler. 1-877-JVN says. 1-877-586-7297. But first, my terrific expert panel. Gene Casares, correspondent for the Legal Network in session. Pat Brown, criminal profiler. Stacey Honowitz, Florida prosecutor. Michelle Borba, psychologist. And on the phone, Sherry Matthews, editor for the Tracy Press, which is breaking so many big stories in this case. Sherry, what is the very latest?
Well, the latest is that the public defender who is representing Melissa Huckabee said the defense will withdraw its request to exhume the remains of Sandra Cantu. If you'll remember, the day after Sandra was buried, the defense had asked for a second autopsy in order to conduct some independent tests, and today they said that they didn't need to do that. So the medical examiner said that the relevant samples were preserved. So at this point, there probably will be no second autopsy. Other than
that, you know what? Let's get into that for 1 second, because that's big news, Stacey Honowitz. As a prosecutor yourself, what do you make of the fact that the defense suddenly backed off that request?
Well, I had originally thought that the reason they were asking for the second autopsy, Jane, was because if they can try to prove that no rape occurred and there wasn't genital trauma, then certainly that's the special circumstance that could be off the table for the death penalty. Now it appears as though they have a closer look at the autopsy report, and maybe it's more clear to them that, in fact, there was genital trauma. Any samples that they need to retest were preserved, and so there's no need now for that second autopsy. Obviously, there was something in that report that made them say there's no need for us to have a forensic pathologist go in and question what was already done.
Wow, you know, I'm thinking about all this, and I'm coming back to the other big news. Sherry Matthews, tell us the very latest on this whole drama now about a 4-hour abduction of a child back in January, and why it was not investigated, given that the family said that a purple Kia was used to take this child. This woman, Melissa Huckabee, drives a purple Kia, and apparently she admitted all this. We just heard the audio to a reporter that she did take the child.
Well, all the Tracy police are saying today is that that they had no probable cause to arrest Melissa Huckabee at the time, and you know, they said that they interviewed her, and there was nothing to go on there.
Well, I just don't understand that. Pat Brown, criminal profiler, a child, a 7-year-old. You heard the sister saying she was wobbling, she could barely talk, she was falling down. The hospital determined she's got muscle relaxers in her system. What would somebody do? What would their goal be if they give a child muscle relaxers? And I'm almost afraid to ask that question. And B, why wouldn't police immediately become suspicious?
Well, I think, first of all, we're seeing, Jane, an escalation on Huckabee's part, because back in 2005, she was saying that her husband was involved in child abduction. Then this occurs, and then we have the actual homicide. So we're seeing an escalation of the fantasy of abducting a child and doing something to a child. So I think that's the middle spot right there. But as to why police didn't do anything, I can sort of understand that, because we're, this had not happened yet, this murder. What they had in hand at that time was a mother who had her own issues with alcohol and drugs, that confused things, and they didn't really know where the blame lay. You got a church woman, a woman who's drinking too much, and they sort of go, they just let it go because they didn't have any reason to suspect this kind of horrible thing.
I'm sure what happened was when they went out and they interviewed, if they came out and they interviewed and she said, I had permission to take this child, the grandmother gave me permission, they probably thought there's no kidnapping, this mother might be on drugs and alcohol and doesn't remember. Right. And it's exactly right. They probably didn't think, who are they going to blame this on if the child's not going to tell us where she got any of these drugs from?
Jane?
Yes.
Here's what I think is going to be important with all of this that has just come out. We don't know the toxicology report yet on little Cantu, Sandra Cantu. And once that comes back, we've got to see if there's anything in her system, because the importance of this is this could come into the criminal murder trial as a prior bad act. We've all heard of that before. You don't have to have a conviction. You don't even have to have an arrest. It's if situations are so similarly situated to show that there's absence of mistake or intent or accident. So we've got to see if the facts of that relate to this so similarly that prosecutors will be able to bring it in.
Last night on Larry King... Well, let me just get to this first.
Okay.
On Larry King Live, Sergeant Tony Sheneman, a spokesman for the Tracy Police Department, was asked why no arrest was made back in January when Huckabee was linked to this case of an allegedly drugged little girl. Listen to his response.
Was the fact that her mother had been drinking, did that change the position of the police department?
That would have had no bearing on any of the police officers' actions. We would be concerned, as we were, for the well-being of the child, and the condition of the parents have no input on that whatsoever.
On that same show, forensic pathologist Dr. Cyril Wecht made serious allegations regarding the police work done on this little 7-year-old's apparent 4-hour abduction in January. Listen.
I'd like to add this, Larry, that the law enforcement agents were guilty of malpractice because musculoskeletal relaxants in the little girl came from somewhere. So the fact that the mother had alcohol on her breath did not excuse or immunize her from child abuse, from improper maternal care. And that should have been followed through, whether it was from Melissa Huckabee or whether it was from the mother.
Michelle Borba, psychologist, that should have been followed through. What do you do when you give a child drugs? What is your motive? What do you do to this child?
Is very similar to what a sexual predator does. They don't want disclosure. What they want the child to, they want to take advantage of the child. And then, when they let the child go, killing is not the motive. When they let the child go, they want to make sure that the child doesn't tell.
So if they're all drugged up, they can't tell?
Exactly. So it'd be very interesting to see if they do any kind of toxicology reports on Sandra, if they can figure out if they were also the drug in the same thing.
Oh my gosh. And we've got to talk to this 7-year-old and try to find out what might have happened to this poor child. Everybody hang on. More on this jaw-dropping twist in just a moment. Should cops have dug deeper into the reported prior abduction by Huckabee? Call 1-877-JDM says. 1-877-586-7297. Tell me what you think. Then cops are...